Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs, your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. For those that sat in the comments, yes, lateness is greatness. This is what we like on this show. I got to say, for those that want the green room chat, many ask us, can we get the green room chat? I said, if we clip those green room chats together, my God, there'd be some gold in there. We could get people into trouble. We would never do that on Last Word on Spurs. We really would not. Look, I'm joined by, he is the crazy instructor, the conductor, the runner of this crazy epic train. Lee McQueen's in the house. Macca, how are you, my man?
Yeah, I'm getting on well, mate. Getting on well. Back for, was it how I say it? Back for another one. We done one yesterday, of course, together, and on with the wonderful guest that you were about to introduce. And I absolutely love doing these shows with the main man.
He is the main man. Look, I've got to say, the last few times I've had this man on, I end up personally grovelling, apologising to him for the hour and a bit we put him through because things haven't always gone as well. And look, I'm going to say, I can promise this man that this next hour is going to be fun, is going to be vibrant, is going to be upbeat. It is a man that's been here on a number of occasions that had to really kind of give us a hug, hold us tight, tell us we're going to be all right. Tell us there are better times ahead. It is the main man, the wonderful Darren Lewis is back on Last One on Spurs. Dada, how are you? Lovely to have you here.
It's really good to be back again. And actually really good to see that now that I've come back, the team are doing fantastic. So maybe I was a little bit right to say that if you hung in there, things will turn around.
Yeah. Do you know what? That's, the funny thing is, you did actually say to us in the summer, I believe, when we had you on, you could quietly, confidently see a better time ahead for Tottenham. I think in the summer, I think we all were a little bit unsure as to where things were going. Obviously, we lost the poster boy of the football club in Harry Kane. And of course, on the eve of the season, that was really worrying times. But I mean, it has been, I've got to say, a really uplifting last 4 or 5 months. And you know what, with Postecoglou, we're going to get into it because look, I think we all are in love with the man. And I've got to say, before we see, mate, there is absolute love for you when you come on this show. I got to say, you are a man that is loved by the nation, mate. So thank you so much for your time. Got to ask you, Daz, I mean, it's been more of a quieter window than I don't know whether you imagined it to be. I mean, again, Spurs, feels bizarre saying this, Spurs have been one of the most busiest teams so far during this window. Is that what you were roughly expecting coming into January? Did you have a tip off that it was going to be like this? What's it been like this January window compared to some of the other ones that you've faced and gone through?
Well, yeah, I've sort of go back to Jacques Santini. Gosh, so 2003, 4.
Back his face.
Yeah.
Not even a manager, Darren.
I go back even further than that. I mean, the one thing I like about this window for you guys is that the club have moved really quickly to address the problems that you had in November, December. And we all know years ago with Spurs had a situation where they'd have a problem and they'd wait. Second week, third week, fourth week. And then around about the last few days, there'd be a little bit of movement. But I think this time around, they've been in really quick, good young player, exciting player. The fact that he's rejected Bayern Munich to come to Spurs, that in itself is a massive statement. And I think as far as Werner is concerned, people have kind of torn him down a bit, but he excites me. He really excites me. I'll tell you why. I covered Spurs a lot when he was there, and no matter how many chances he misses, his head's up straight away and he's at it again. He has got the heart of a lion, and from my point of view, with the pace that he's got, he's actually a more intelligent people than people give him credit for. I love what he gives to your front line and the way that Postecoglou wants to play. So 2 really good initial signings that you've made so far. They make the squad stronger. It's fascinating to me that given you had to play at some stages a team full of fullbacks at points in December, a team full of fullbacks, a back line full of fullbacks late in December, and you lost Maddison, no Son, Asia Cup, whatever else, and now you're this close to Arsenal, who started off like a train, and everyone obviously was saying, oh, what, they came close last season. We could do it this time around. Look at where you are now. Just one quick thing, if I can. I remember saying in August, selling Kane was the right thing to do. Even I think we did a show back then, and I was saying selling Kane was the right thing to do. And everybody talked about what he could do as an individual, but you are a team. And I think a lot of players were hiding behind Kane the last couple of years. I think a lot of players needed to step out from behind him and take responsibility, which is happening now. And everyone was a winner with Kane going, because you guys got a huge amount of money for a player who was in the last year of his contract. He got his move to Bayern Munich. He's playing in the Champions League and they're competing for the title, even though Bayer Leverkusen are, I think they're 6-7 points clear with a game in hand. They're doing really well out there. So, and they've not been beaten all season, whereas Bayern lost at the weekend, but that's not your problem anymore. And I just think you are a better team. It seems ludicrous to say it, but West Ham are seeing it without Declan Rice. You can pin your hopes on one player and think, oh my goodness, the sky's going to fall in if this player leaves. But I don't think Son gets the credit he deserves. Jamie here is saying James Maddison's the glue that holds you together. Absolutely, I agree with that as well. There are other players now that you're looking at and saying, if he's not playing, I'm a little bit wide. For me, it's Van der Ven. If Van der Ven doesn't play in that back line, you don't have the organisation that helped you in those initial first games of the season. But all round, you look a better side. And I think your best signing is Ange Postecoglou.
There's evidence that suggests that in other teams as well, isn't there? You know, you look at even Bale with us, 2013, Bale leaves, 2014, Poch comes in, 2015, we have our record points total, best defence in the Premier League, right? And, you know, everyone would have thought that our team would have fallen apart when Bale left. You know, you can go back to Liverpool with Coutinho, 100 and whatever it was, ridiculous money, 140 million or whatever it was to Barcelona. Arguably, that's their sliding doors moment when we battered them 4-1 at Wembley. They got rid of some of their defenders. I can't remember his name. It always escapes me. Brought in Van Dijk, brought in Alisson, and won the lot. Lovren, thank you. Yeah, Lovren. And they won the lot. So, you know, there is evidence of that as well outside. I think sometimes, though, with Kane, just on that point, is that you kind of needed for it to happen to see if it would work or not. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, because there's lots of pundits out there, lots and lots of very good ones and famous ones, whatever, saying we're going to be bottom half of the table with no Kane. We're gone. This, and the other. And the reality of the situation is exactly what you've just said, Darren, which is, you know, we're a smidgen away from the top three, even the top two, in a time where the last 10 Premier League games we've had utter decimation with injuries as well. And I'm completely convinced that if them injuries hadn't happened to us, like they haven't to the likes of some of the other clubs that are above us, we would have a better points total than we've currently got. I can't say we'd be sitting top because the table today looks a bit ominous with Liverpool now 8 points clear of us. But you look at the fixtures that we've got without a full squad in January, in the beginning of February, and then the amount of games that we've got with a full squad, fingers crossed that everyone comes back okay. It's looking good for sure. I mean, you know, we've got to go some to try and catch some of them teams. I'm not saying that we're going to win the league. I'm not saying that now, but we, you know, after the start we had and where we are today, we should definitely be focusing on in my opinion, a top 3 finish. I think it's definitely within our grasp, maybe even higher. You know, and reeling in Arsenal, I think that would be a massive catch for us if we can finish above Arsenal this season after, you know, the generational talent they've got, the generational manager they've got, you know, the 680 million that they've spent, and we can reel them in after one season of them finishing above us out of the last 8. That would be a ridiculous season, especially if we add the FA Cup to that as well. I don't want much, Postecoglou. Come on, Ange. Don't want much.
Can I ask you both a question? We did this off air in the green room, but seeing as everyone's watching, and thanks for all the nice comments from everyone watching, but I asked you both, is this the best you felt about Spurs? Take away the trophy, you know, League Cup 2008, but and get into the Champions League final. Take those things away. I'm more just talking about feeling proud of the team and happy with where you are, because I think that you've got a real identity about the way you play, regardless of who's fit and who's not. And there's a discipline and as well. And what I said in the green room was the only times I could compare it to is either start of the second season under Postecoglou, the 2010 season, I think it was, under Harry Redknapp.
Yeah.
And maybe the famous 5 under Ozzy Ardiles. That was just kamikaze, but it was fun to watch as well. I'm only sticking with Premier League history rather than any era before that. But I just think this is the best period. But which of those periods is it for you, or is there a different one entirely?
I think for me, I just think now is just a feeling where there's just pure genuine excitement going to every game, that regardless of the 11 and selects. And to be fair, as we've said already, he's not really had much choice given the injury to suspensions, that you just feel going to every game, you've got a chance to win, which again, that might sound crazy because, again, in football, you should always believe you've got a chance to win. But when you look at previously with Tottenham, when Spurs have typically made 4 or 5 changes to their side, I think there's a general feeling that the players coming in, there's such an alarming drop-off that you don't actually believe you can get a result. But bizarrely, we've gone to Man City away. We've gone to Old Trafford away. And being without 4 or 5 players, we're going there actually genuinely feeling we can still get a result here. And the mad thing is, when we come away from these places only with a point, we're actually quite disappointed we haven't gone away with all 3. Which I think says a lot about just how far we've come in the space of 4 or 5 months. New manager, new system, pretty much new 7 or 8 players that are bedding in, new, obviously, internal structure that we'll come on to as well, Dazza. So I've got to be honest and say, at the moment, I'm absolutely loving it. And I know for many fans that really fell out of love with the side last season, I'm not sure if I can tell you, I did not think it was going to be as quick as this. I felt this was going to be that word everyone hates, the T word, transitional. I think many people were dreading it was going to be that kind of season. So I've been so pleasantly surprised by just the belief that we've got, and the fact we've got Man City on the horizon and we are going into that game believing we can win it against the holders, I think says as far we've come. And I just honestly, at the moment, I'm just pleased we've got you back in, Dazzle, and it's a positive one.
My 2 pennies worth on that. I think that, I agree with a lot of the comments as well. I said in agreement, didn't I, guys? I think it's probably more akin to the Poch scenario. I mean, the 16-17 season was unbelievable. We went undefeated at White Hart Lane. It was a record points total of 86 points. I think we only conceded 26 goals in that entire season. But the back 4/5 in that era was Danny Rose, Carl Walker, Jan Vertonghen, Toby Alderweireld, and of course the King, Lloris. And now you look at Vicario, Doggy, Van der Ven, Romero, and Porro, and it's akin to that. There's a lot of people, and I don't think that they'll disagree in the comments. Please let us know if you do. But there's a lot of people that are thinking, yeah, that feels like the same. It feels like it's the same standard building. I think the only thing I would say is, because it was the last season at White Hart Lane, because we went undefeated, because Poch had already had half a season or season before that, 2014-2015 season, under his belt, and Ange hasn't had that. But Ange has come into a scenario which wasn't as bad as what Poch come into. Do you see where I'm coming from? Like, again, here's the thing. People will level this at me and say, well, you finished 8th. You were rubbish under Stellini and Conte and this and other. And that's fair. We did finish 8th. But we were only 3 points or 4 points, I think, off a top 5 finish. And actually, at this stage last season, we were 3rd in the league, and it was that Southampton game.
Mental, isn't it?
Right, that 2-2, with that 3-3. 3-2 went 3-3
you're right.
in the last minute that made the wheels fall off. I mean, you have to date check this. People in the comments, listeners, you'll know this as well. But you have to date check this because I haven't got the dates with me. But I reckon it's virtually to the year ago to the day that Conte went mad in his press conference, right, and spat out all that stuff, which was amazing for us and people in the press and journalists. And actually, he said some truths. So I think Ange has come into a scenario, even though we were bad, and even though the football was dross, and even though the fan base was on its knees, he's almost like coming to a scenario where he had a free hit. And that might have given him a little bit more not confidence feelings. I think he's a confident guy, he's going to do it anyway, but a little bit more leeway to rip up the book and change the amount of what he was going to do anyway. See where I'm coming from? And I think that for us now, all of a sudden, I agree with you, Rick, and a lot of the comments. I go into games now thinking we're going to win. Like I didn't think that last year. That's why I'm thinking in the cups, right? I know we lost in the Carabao Cup, so that's ridiculous. I'm even saying that, right? But actually going into cup games now, you know that you're going to give it a go. And a cup game, as we all know, is a one-off game. You have to win it on the day. And the way we play, and the way we set up, and the way we are as a club means that we're giving ourselves a really good chance in winning that one-off football match. Does that make more sense? Whereas actually under Conte, Jose, whatever, even though Jose won lots of trophies, you would have come in and sat back and actually defended against City. Whereas now we're going to go out and attack them.
Do you know, I'll add to that because my Spurs mates all tell me now, even if you lose, there's a feeling that there's an identity about the team. But the expectation isn't that you're going to lose, like you're rightly saying. And on top of all of that, I would say when I watch your Spurs now, I never feel it's over until it's over. And when I watched Spurs before, I felt that if they'd fallen behind, they just didn't have the mentality to come back and get a point, let alone win. I felt heads would drop. I saw mentalities just fall apart, players give up the ghost. I know you said that he's got a free hit after Conte. And I suppose in a way, Conte might be vindicated in so much as if you look at the 11, how many players are still in the 11 that Conte criticised at Southampton? Not many. I think Son
was probably the standout because it was Son that gave the penalty away to make it 3-3. And I don't think he played after that. So that probably is one, right?
Yeah, one. And the fact that, and I know you're going to get onto the recruitment in a bit, but the fact that the recruitment was so quick, Vicario for me is one of the signings of the season.
It's been brilliant.
But it's just a free hit thing, because I almost wonder if the free hit thing maybe underestimates the job that Postecoglou's done.
Yeah, I didn't mean it negative towards him.
Because I was just thinking of when Villas-Boas took over from Redknapp, and it was all very acrimonious at the time, and some people felt he had a free hit. Redknapp himself had a free hit, 2 points from 8 games. Remember when he took over?
That's fair.
Dazza, Harry didn't tell us much about the 2 points from 8 games. He didn't mention it at all.
That is true, though, isn't it? That is true. It is true. Maybe they all get free hits.
Absolutely. But I just think with Postecoglou, it's the very down to earth. I think there are some clubs that are a fantastic fit for a manager, and vice versa. Some managers that are a fantastic fit for a club. Klopp was a fantastic fit for Liverpool because he'd come from Dortmund, where they were almost like a republic, and you know, going to Liverpool, there is just that intensity of belief and feeling and passion and whatever else. Excuse me. I think as far as Postecoglou is concerned, he's a very down-to-earth guy who comes into an area where people just want to earn a living and just want to enjoy their football and just want an honest day's work from the people that they're around. And they don't want to be surrounded by, I can't say the word, but, you know, when you go to work, you just don't want to be surrounded by bad people. You want to be surrounded by people who are willing to put in as much of a shift as you. And so you can have the tactics, you can have the team selection, you can even have the A-list players. But if you haven't got that man management ability to make people feel good about themselves and good about their work and good about themselves, even if they make a mistake, that you're going to forgive them, then I don't think we'd have seen the improvement in some of the players. I whisper it quietly, even Emerson Royal looks like a player under Ange Postecoglou. And that says a lot for what he's doing.
Yeah, it says a lot. Obviously, there's interest in him. We'll come on to that shortly. There's one thing I do want to ask you. I think we've already kind of touched upon his start. I mean, you said there, look, again, he has been a great start. And what I'm actually also interested to ask you is that with the media, he's got a very interesting, I feel, persona about him that we saw it a few press conferences ago. I want to say after the Burnley Cup win, where one of the journos seemed to question a matter of fact that Dyer was not in the squad, and he went back and said, "Don't question my authority." Now,
it's an integrity thing.
Again,
Said,
it's funny because isn't it? From a lot of people, they're saying, "Oh, Andy's very much a cuddly teddy bear." But the one thing I've noticed with him is that he doesn't like being answered the same question twice, and he doesn't like anybody really questioning when he's made a decision for it to even be probed again. So I'm just want to ask you about that. Again, he's done a great job so far. The Spurs fans love him. I think as long as you have a joke on his terms, it seems absolutely fine. But again, just want to know from your perspective in the media, what you've made of him as a character so far.
Well, I mean, character is a really interesting word because there are some managers who are characters to such an extent that you don't take them seriously, or because they maybe go too far the other way. That moment, it was Eric Dyer, and somebody had asked whether he was really injured, basically. And
yep.
And the answer he gave is, "Don't question my integrity again." That's authority. That's steel inside the velvet glove. I remember Terry Venables, God rest him, ahead of the Euros in 1996. He was doing a live TV interview, and someone whacked a ball over, I think it was, and long after the tournament finished, he gave an interview where he explained that afterwards, the person who had done it was all very genial and on air, and he was all very relaxed and whatever else, and you would think it didn't bother him in the slightest, but behind the scenes he went ballistic. And players that you talk to about him would tell you that he was a man's man. He treated everybody like adults. He put arms around shoulders. He gave you confidence. He made you feel as though you were 10 feet tall, but you couldn't cross the line with him ever. And I get that sense with Postecoglou, which is why it was quite a surprise at the start of the season when players like Højbjerg and Dyer were on the bench, and even in games where you thought they could have started because you had injuries, they were still on the bench, because it might well have been, and we can only surmise this at the moment, but it might well have been that maybe when he came in, they felt maybe they could nudge you a little bit, and they quickly found out that they couldn't. And I love that about managers. He backs himself. When you go into the press conferences, I don't know if you guys get YouTube feeds or video feeds, whatever, which allow you to see the whole thing. But
we do, yep.
There are lots of bits of the press conferences that don't get reported. But in those bits, he's very honest about his career trajectory and how very often he gets patronized and derided because he's Australian. Australians don't have what we would regard as, well, what Europeans would regard as a strong footballing culture.
Yeah.
But he's got a fantastic football brain, as we all know. And he's earned the respect that he's got in the game. Yokohama, Celtic, where he had that fabulous home record, undefeated at home for ages, for an entire season. And even here, with the impact that he's made, everybody thought the sky would fall in with Harry Kane gone. But you look at the individual improvement in players, you look at the identity plays with Patrick Davison does an interview with him after the Monday night game. I can't even remember. Chelsea. And Chelsea shred the back line. You're playing the high line. And he says, do you think it was a bit crazy to play that way? And he says, no, that's who we are. And I love that. That's who we are. And when you're a Spurs fan and you see that identity, you feel proud of that. I didn't know what you were under Conte. And I have to put my hands up because I came and I defended Conte. I'm a big man love for Conte. The CV was fantastic. The trophy cabinets bulging. But he didn't have the man management skills. And Postecoglou's got that.
I think that was just quickly, Mick, on that point, Darren. Again, you make a brilliant I mean, talk to we could listen to you all day. But the Chelsea game, we were chatting about this yesterday. We had Paul Coity on the show yesterday, and we were sort of saying our favourite moments. And I think, it was quite a standout moment for a lot of the fans and the listeners of that pod, which was, I was in the South Stand. I'm a South Stand season ticket holder, and we gave the team a standing ovation after that Chelsea match. Yes, we've just been beaten 4-1, but we all knew what it was all about. That was our moment of the season where all of us knew this is, like what you just said, who we are. This is what we're going to do. And actually, if you really want change, I think Ange might have said this, I don't want to be nicking his words, but I believe this in business as well. If you really want change, if you really, really want change, there's no point just scratching around the surface, is there? Do you know what I mean? There's no point. If you're really going to change it, let's bloody change it. Let's rip up the rule book and give it and change it. And that's what he's done. And I think you're right. Like you say, we can only surmise, but the Højbjerg, maybe the Dyer situation, playing fullbacks as centre-back in front of Eric Dyer when Eric Dyer's fit, that is a message 100%, isn't it? To say you have not got a future at this football club, or do you remember that time when you thought we could push me or you can irk me? We won't know. You ain't never doing that again. See what I mean? And I think that's good, isn't it?
I ask you again, this is who we are, right? Well, that's who you were under Ossie Ardiles when you had that famous five. Klinsmann was a spearhead. I don't know if you remember. What's the difference between that? Because that was, people called that kamikaze. I thought it was quite exciting, actually.
It was exciting. 5 forwards he was playing. I remember that quote. There was a quote I just directly from Ossie Ardiles. Sorry to interrupt. It might have been in your fine paper, to be fair, which was all the years ago before we had social media, all the younger viewers and listeners. Blissful days. I know it was. But there was a quote from Ossie Ardiles directly, and I think it's some. I have to, paraphrase, but I think he said something like, "Tonight, my Tottenham are 5th." Because everyone was criticising for kamikaze football, and he'd taken up Spurs up to top 5 in the Premier League back then in the 90s. I mean, you're having a laugh, mate. Normally we finish like 14th, 15th. So he was loving it, and we had the Romanians in the team, didn't we? Popescu, Dumitrescu, we had Barmby and Teddy Sheringham, Klinsmann, and I'm missing and I think it was Dumitrescu. I think that was the famous 5 at the top.
I must say, the one thing that people pick up on the fact is that, I feel like this time around, we've actually got, with no disrespect to the team at the time, you've actually got a defence, you've got a midfield, and you've got some serious abundance of quality in there that really does provide a balance that, I think, now we're going to come on to this anyway, but I mean, Udogie and Porro, I mean, you're talking about, for me, two of the best fullbacks, wing-backs we've seen in the Premier League this season. And that's before you add to the fact that in those first 10 games, Romero and Van der Ven as a partnership were absolutely remarkable. I think in the first 5, I didn't even concede a foul. I mean, they were just absolutely incredible. And again, I think testament to Ange that after that Chelsea defeat, many thought, okay, it's going to be interesting how Spurs recover from this. And obviously, subsequently, we had, I think, again, a run where we lost 3 on the bounce. And of course, we had that defeat to Brighton and, of course, towards the Christmas period. But what I've got to say is that Spurs, for all those subsequent setbacks they've had, injuries, suspensions, they have ultimately found a way to recover. And the great thing about Ange is that not once has he ever pulled the excuse card out with it being injuries and suspensions. And I know, look, Jose Mourinho still has a very, very high standing in the game. I still think Jose will go on and probably get himself another decent job. But I think the hard thing was when Jose was here and... The hard thing with Jose was here is, I mean, if you remember, Lee, we had that period of the Jose where we had about 4 or 5 players out. And Jose was saying, ultimately...
He was
paraphrasing.
Crying, he was crying. I remember.
It was more paraphrasing, saying we're going to have to basically sacrifice this game for that game because we can't do 2 in a week. We can't do that. And with Ange, it's just so refreshing to have a manager saying, we want to win them all. We want to go into every game believing we're going to win. And I think, again, testament to him that as a person, and I think, Dal, you allude to it, from where he's grown up, he's had to fight for every opportunity, every moment in his career. I think to get to the Premier League now for his age, I mean, no disrespect to him, has been absolutely remarkable. And I think, again, with no disrespect, he may not have ever thought he was going to arrive in the Premier League. And I just think now he ain't going to change. He's going to play his way. And the funny thing is that I think 10, 11 games in, we had a little bit of a wobble. There was a bit of a brief chat on here, which I know, Lee, you couldn't stomach hearing when we said, oh, maybe Ange might change it up for the City game. And
No,
Lee, I remember you saying to me,
was
you
I?
were like,
I was not.
you went, this man is never going to change and shouldn't change.
100%. No, I agree with it.
No,
Yeah.
What I was about to say before I started coughing wildly was this defense. I know you will go through the team, I'm sure, but this defense reminds me a lot of Carl Walker and Danny Rose and Toby Alderweireld.
Yang and Toby
Alderweireld arrived because the pieces were there. You've got Udogie, although to be fair, I didn't think Udogie would be this good a player. None of us did, because
likewise,
and it kind of speaks to a bigger issue around the fact that recruitment at Spurs has just improved out of all recognition. You used to be scratching around for the scraps for other clubs' cast-offs, your Van der Vaarts, where they were done at other clubs, and maybe there might be one last hurrah in them. But now you're getting the young, exciting talents. And anyway, Udogie one side, Porro the other. They both got the quality. Ramiro's got the quality, but his disciplinary record's got to improve. But I don't know if Dragassin's arrival might just improve that disciplinary record.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Because if he does get himself sent off again, then he might not get his place back.
Amen.
But just honestly, Van de Ven being there really does it reminds me of Alderweireld coming in and knitting it all together. And you haven't got a back four, you've got a back five now, because the understanding with Vicario, he's so understated, so calm, but he commands his area so well. His agility is fantastic. And £17 million, I mean, honestly, Spurs could do my shopping at the moment if they want to.
I gotta say, it's not often you would say that with Spurs. I mean, you know what? Go on, Macca.
I was going to say, just talking about the recruitment piece, we've gone off script a little bit because this show is just absolutely brilliant. But we've made some real key integral appointments, I think. Sorry if I'm taking your question, but with Scott Munn now starting his role as CEO under the club's new data-led recruitment team, which I'm a massive fan of. My business is all about behaviours and competences, data-led for organisations, bringing people into their world. And obviously now looking at that from a football perspective, technical director Johan Lange, chief scout Rob McKenzie, head of football insights strategy Frederick Leth, along with a confirmation that we know that strategy is still cooking on a consultancy basis. Really keen to know from you, Dan, how that dynamic is working as a group, because we touched upon this in previous shows, but it does feel like now it has all kind of come together. And Ange even said it himself, I think in one of his press conferences the other day, that we're all aligned. Like he was saying, like with Werner coming in, we were aligned. He wasn't on his radar, but when the team brought his profile to him, he was like, "Yeah, I'm aligned. We're all aligned," even all the way through to Daniel Levy. So the changes that have been made, kind of behind the scenes, with all of the people that we've just talked about, it's really made a difference, haven't it, Darren?
I think as well, the supporters' trust deserves a mention here as well, because those guys, you guys who've got the financial investment in the team, let's not kid ourselves. You've been telling the club, we're not happy with the recruitment. You've been making it very clear. Players have been making it very clear. Everyone remembers that Danny Rose interview where he said that, sometimes I've got to Google players that are coming in here. But what that's led to is very similar to what it's led to at West Ham, where Tim Steidten has gone in. Suddenly you haven't got David Sullivan bidding for players, but you've got Steidten basically saying, look, we want these players and we're going to do the deals to get them. Man United have got Omar Barada now has come in because they've realised the recruitment's been terrible. The culture's been even worse. And we've got to have a whole club solution to what's going on. And you look at Spurs now, and it's very similar with these guys who are best in class. And I mean, Lee, it's quite funny, actually. It's a little bit like when sometimes I'm on TV and I get a former striker asking me about someone's performance on the pitch. I'm like, I should be asking you the question, son. Well, you work in data. So tell me, how does data work? Because we've all grown up, and everybody watching now, we've grown up focusing on the evidence of our own eyes in terms of what a player can do. So how do you work in data? How do you use that in a way that matters or makes sense?
Because you track. I mean, it's different for football to what I do in terms of what we're tracking. We're tracking competency, behaviour. We're tracking the person, the personality, that individual, the way they are, the way they act, their temperament, how they can actually handle high pressure situations or low pressure situations. So, most of the time in football, as fans, we see how many step overs someone could do, how many goals, how many assists. So it's that technical ability. But look at Ndombele as a perfect example from a football and personality point of view. Absolute technical genius. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I mean, he can do step overs, he can do ball juggles, he can do what he wants. But his attitude, his personality, the way he lives his life is not conducive to being a top-class elite professional footballer. So we use the data around personality and competency and understanding how that essentially works. And I think when they're on their own, so data from the tactical perspective or data from the personality perspective, when they're on their own, they're not as much use as when they're together. So when you start to look at what we see with our own eyeballs, how we see the data with personality behaviours, competencies, how we see the data tactically, and you wrap all that together, that gives you a better understanding of who that individual is and if they're going to fit. Does that make sense? So
it does actually make sense.
The data.
It does make sense, actually, and I don't know if one or two people watching might feel, even you might think, Ricky, it sounded like you're doing yourself a disservice, because when you think about how individuals react to high pressure situations, that's football. When you think about individuals' consistency and the other metrics that you were looking at, all of those things are football. They are the kind of things, because you aspire as a club to be playing at the highest level in the biggest games. You want players that can react in that way to be able to cope with high pressure situations so that they can retain their consistency in high pressure situations. And it just seems to me that all of the men that you mentioned in that recruitment team are very good, not just at spotting the talent, but at working out whether or not they are Spurs players in terms of the way they interact with the group, in terms of the way that they react to adversity, in terms of the way that they prepare themselves and live their lives. And I think the data would show them as much all of those things as it would, how many step overs they can do, how many crosses they can put into the box, how many goals they can score, whether they can take responsibility, and all of those things. I've got to say, so far, I'm looking at all of the players that you've signed so far, and all of them seem to me, if I look at the way you play at the moment, they all seem to be following a similar metric. They're all team players. They're all hard workers. They're all players who do have a skill set. You look at the way you're sharing around the goals, and you're among the highest scorers in the Premier League at the moment. To me, that says to me that there is joined up thinking off the pitch in terms of the players that you're bringing in to perform on it. I've yet to see any disruptive influences at the club. Even Richarlison, who was off his rocker. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that.
It was off his game, for sure.
When I say use the term off his rocker, I mean that in terms of he was very badly behaved when he was at Everton, and he would get himself into what I used to describe in my match reports as a silly bit of nonsense on the pitch.
Can I just say, that's why Everton fans loved him, isn't it? That's why Everton fans loved him, and why he got that standing ovation only a couple of weeks ago back at the stadium.
But the thing is, Ricky, at Spurs, you have to love him for the football. You're not.
So
You're
true.
not. You're not.
You're right. You're
Not.
spot on.
You're not a club
Right.
for cult heroes anymore. You're
No,
a
you're
club
right.
for
You're right.
serious players because of
You're
what
right.
you aspire to, and
Mm.
that's the reason why. Honestly, him in particular, and I'm going off on a forgive me for going off on
No, it's
tangents.
fine.
I'm terrible, and if you were to take me for a drink, I go all over the place. But
I'll see you tomorrow night, Taz.
Take that. Sounds like take that. We're doing after the show. I'll get over from Austin, mate.
Macca, get back from Austin. We're gonna meet in.
It's a 10-hour flight, mate. I mean,
Look at that. I'll tell you what, I feel underdressed now with a hat. That's superb.
On a serious note, Richarlison is a fabulous example of Postecoglou's man management ability and the way that the club are handling their players at the moment. Two things strike me about the things so far. One of them is that I used to see players get taken off like after an hour, 70 minutes, if they had the slightest twinge or whatever. But Postecoglou is really trying to protect the fitness of the players. But with Richarlison, after, there was that situation where he was playing for Brazil, he was substituted, he's sitting on the bench and he's weeping. And he gives the interview afterwards and he talks about his mental health and he's taken out of the firing line. And the context of this as well is that in the press conferences, so many of the questions are about Richarlison's lack of goals. And there was that really weird stat as well where he hadn't scored with his feet. All his goals had been headed goals. I think it was about 5 in the other competitions and 1 in the Premier League. And he just took him out the firing line and said, we're going to look after you. We're going to protect you. And so often we criticize clubs for not doing that. But he really did. And I have to assume the club did as well and put the man first rather than the player. And since he's come back, he's been sensational. And I think that they're the small things that people don't talk a lot about. We're talking about tactics and formations and victories against this club and that club. I think there is a real holistic approach to looking after players right now, which is helping you to get the best out of them. And even about players that other people would regard as average, or seeing that level of improvement in them, that to me says you're building something really special at the football club.
Can I ask you, Daz, just on Macca, feel free to come in on Richarlison. You bring him up. I mean, he's in fine form at the moment. It's 6 in his last 6 Premier League games, and there is that confidence back that I feel with him that he's much a confidence player. It's about the arm around the shoulder. I mean, Andrew's literally, I think, got that guy running through brick walls for him, like he's done with many of the players in the squad. And again, Coity yesterday saying that to us that, with an Ange Postecoglou, whether it's a half-time team talk, whether it's a team talk before the guys go out, there is such that belief in those players that when they go out there, they're ready to go to the war for the team. Do you think with Richie, had it not gone as well as what it has done over the last month, there would be more links potentially towards Saudi? And look, I think this window, he'll definitely be a Spurs player, but come the summer, do you feel, depending on the striker situation at Tottenham, they brought Werner in, we know Spurs have got an option to buy there. Do you feel Richarlison, it really is depending on how he finishes the season as to whether he will be a Spurs player next season, in your opinion?
I think he will, actually. I think he hasn't really hit his best form yet.
No, he hasn't.
There's a really good player in there. And I think he's maturing as a footballer. I think he's maturing as a man. He's still younger than people realize. And I was about to say give him credit for. You can't really give someone credit for their age. But he's younger than people think, and I think he's got some good years to come at Spurs. You look at the way he plays at the moment, and there's an intelligence to his game that is developing all the time. He's learning how to bring other people into the play. His composure in front of goal is improving a lot, and I think he's got having the confidence of the manager has done a lot for his game. And I think that next season he's going to be even better than this season. I don't actually see Spurs as the kind of club as well to just jettison players. I mean, gosh, Davinson Sanchez was at the club for so long, he should have been paying council tax. It was just ridiculous. I think as far as Richarlison's concerned, it's been very brief so far. But if I look at Liverpool and I look at the fact that if Núñez doesn't score, Gakpo can. If Gakpo doesn't score, Jota can. If Jota doesn't, Luis Diaz can. If Luis Diaz can't, Salah can. It says to me, you can't have too many strikers. You can't. If you're a club that aspires to big things, you have to have big players able to score goals. And for the expenditure, I don't think Richarlison has achieved anywhere near what he can. And I think he will go on to be a really good player for you in the next couple of seasons.
Well, just to quickly on that, I know you want to move on, Mick. Sorry, but just quickly on that. I mean, we're the third highest goal scorers as a team in the Premier League. 48 Man City, 47 Liverpool, 44 Tottenham Hotspur, the mighty Tottenham Hotspur. And when you talk about sharing goals around, you've just touched upon it there, and we have been doing that. And also, when you look at history as well, I think that's part of the reason when we go way back into the Kane debate is, don't worry, Kane will bail us out. Don't worry, Kane will score. Well, now Kane's not there. Everyone else has got to do it. And Sonny even said that in an interview to Paul Coity that we had on yesterday, was explaining to us that Sonny even said that in an interview that he did with him, which was, look, we've got to step up now. We haven't got our kind of our comfort blanket of Harry Kane scoring 30 goals a season. And I think that's quite apt. I think if you go even further back in history with Tottenham Hotspur and you know who we are and what we're all about, what our core values are as a football club is we are the entertainers. We've always scored goals. Even in the 90s, we've always scored goals. We've always had flair players. David Ginolas, Paul Gascoigne's, you know, Gary Lineker's, top players, top Klinsmann's, the famous five we just talked about earlier. You know, we had Jermaine Defoe, we had Berbatov, we had Keane, we had Darren Bent at the club, and all four of them at the same time. And actually, if you look at the history or the era under Pochettino, when Poch first came in and changed all it around that brilliant team, who did we have goal scorer? Kane. And we had Dele Alli weigh in for that first season, and he was absolutely brilliant. Love Dele Alli still to this day. But after that, it was still Kane. Kane was the main man, but it was Kane. There's nothing wrong with that, having a main man and having a main striker. But how many goals did everyone else get? Single figures, maybe? I mean, Sonny in his first 2-3 seasons was struggling to get into double figures. Now he's the man. Now he's scoring for fun, like winning the Golden Boot and stuff. And I think it's always interesting when you go back and have a look at some of these Premier League. I'm a sad old git sometimes. I go back and look at these Premier League records and whatever. It's always Tottenham. Like Sheringham playing for Tottenham is in the top 10 of goal scorers. Jermaine Defoe, you know, obviously Harry Kane. We've got more goal scorers in there than the rest of the other clubs. It's actually crazy, and it riles other clubs. Maybe this is why people don't like Spurs, because we don't win nothing. We're not a threat to them. So I don't understand why they're worried about it. But we have that ability to have goal scorers over the years. Do you see where I'm coming from, lads?
It's so true.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I think it is, but I think the difference this time around, that this is the first time in the summer you had the rebuild that you should have had in 2018.
Do you know 19. What? Can I just say to you, Dal, that's a lot of the comments that we've had. I've got to say, not just this show, but some people have said that. You know, this is the rebuild that maybe. And I know he's not everyone's favourite friend at the moment because he's obviously down at the West London club. That maybe Pochettino should have had all those years ago.
100%, because you could have saved. Sorry, Lee, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, just because I know that you talk very highly of Daniel as well, and a lot of, you know, polarised his opinion on this show and through Spurs fans, Daniel Levy. But maybe I'm not trying to stick up for him before I get lynched. But maybe we couldn't have that rebuild then because of our scenario, not necessarily with the stadium and with COVID or whatever, but maybe the FFP. And we're seeing now with some of these football clubs that maybe, look, I'm asking the question, is Daniel Levy a genius? After all these years, all of a sudden, it's like, hang on, we've been mediocre for 23 years under them, and we've made some horrific decisions. The recruitment's been bad. We haven't spent the money. But maybe now we're going to start to, maybe not, maybe it's another false dawn. Who knows? You see where I'm coming from? Maybe we couldn't back in 18, 19 when we should have, but maybe we can now. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think as well, you know, to a certain extent, you need a bit of luck with recruitment as well. And you need things to go your way. You need to have the right manager. You need to have the right players. A combination of things needs to come together. I would also say this about Daniel Levy as well. For a long time, and this will always happen in football, football loves pantomime villains. It loves to have certain individuals around whom a narrative builds and just never goes away. And I think Daniel suffered from that, because when I think about the last 10 years, there have been occasions where he's spent a lot of money and he's been let down by players like Ndombele, for example, like Davinson Sanchez, who cost a huge amount of money. And
Lo Celso as well, can I also add in there? Lo Celso, no disrespect to him, huge amount of money on Lo Celso, but he just can't stay fit. Can't
stay fit. I mean,
there you go.
2019 window, we signed Jack Clark for 8 million. That was a little bit of a punt. He's doing brilliantly, by the way. Now over Sunderland. But we signed Ndombele, record signing. Lo Celso, 45 million, and Cess for about 30 million. And Ndombele can't run. Lo Celso's glass, although I like him, to be fair, but he's glass. And so is Cess, and I feel sorry for the lad, because he can't get fit. And that was your 29. That was, we saw each other, didn't we, at the airport, Darren? I don't know if you remember. We saw each other.
I do remember. I do.
Yeah, in Madrid. Champions League, June the 1st, Champions League final. Come on, you Spurs. We lost it, obviously, everyone knows. Then that window was the big window. Oh, we're going to get our signing. We signed Ndombele in July, which was also mental. And everyone thought, here we go. And it was just a nightmare. And like you say, that luck, or a series of bad luck, maybe with some of them signings. You can't sign a player and think you're just going to be injured, right? And that's ultimately what's happened, right?
I think it's absolutely. Brock's saying here, and I totally agree. The biggest miss of all time was that Spurs don't spend money. It's whether it was spent properly. But that goes all the way back. Thank you, Brock, for knitting it back to what you were saying, Ricky, which is that the team is in place now.
Yeah.
To look at the data, to look at the mindset, to do the due diligence, to look at the technical, all those things before you start to look at the technical ability. And then you work in conjunction with the manager. Is he a good fit for what I want to do? Can he play in my system? Is he consistent over a long period of time? Can he deal with high pressure situations? And that's why you've got so many good players in the team, so many consistent players in the team. And that for me is why I think Spurs are in the title race. I think they are in the title race.
What, Darren? Can we? Come on, Darren. We are going for this.
Well, you know what? I need to ask Darren one more question just on the finances. Because again, I must say, look, for a journalist like you, that I don't want to age you here. I say you've been around the block, but look, you are you are the veteran of your game, and there many that turn to you as you are held up in the hierarchy for what you do, and this is why again we're honoured and humbled and privileged that we have some time with you on this show. When you look at the current financial situation in the Premier League and the PSR, and the fact we're seeing Newcastle are potentially having to let go some of their top stars that obviously they wouldn't want to do, but given the financial scrutiny that we're seeing now, they're going to have to do. Everton, another club. Forest as well, of course, they've seen charges. Obviously, we're seeing really tight spending across the league. Do you feel on this point that, with Daniel, that ultimately... We said this earlier, the fact of Lisa about being a genius. Again, many won't like the fact that word being used, a genius, given the fact, Spurs have won one trophy in 20 years. But ultimately, to have the club financially sound in a period where, Spurs are actually now building a squad, a team, a manager that's in place and that can genuinely, as you say there, I don't want to take your words for it, they can actually maybe sustain a challenge. Does it maybe show you now why Spurs have been maybe a little bit prudent in the market? And I've been the first one to criticise them. I've always felt in the last 20 years, with no disrespect, that we've gone into majority of the windows, and I've always felt we've always been a couple of players short. Whereas where I am right now, being honest with you, is that maybe I would be disappointed if a midfielder didn't come in, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. I'd be happy to wait until the summer to get the right midfielder. And the reason I feel like that is Ange has made me believe that he's very much having that say so on recruitment. And again, we look at the point that under obviously Conte, we had Jed Spence labelled a club signing, Arnold Danjuba labelled a club signing. It felt players were actually being forced on the manager, where it feels with Ange that the players coming in, he's had a vital input and a say in those players, bringing them to the club, speaking to them over the phone, actually having that relationship beforehand to not convince them to come to Spurs, but really sell them the fact that things are going to be different here. Whether you're going to join me or not, like you said to Maddison, it's going to be different. So I suppose the question I'm trying to ask you really is that, are Spurs, in comparison to their competitors, in a really good space when it comes to that PSR piece that we're now seeing is affecting some of the biggest clubs in the league?
Yeah, well, the talk is that around about 80% of the clubs in the Premier League are nervous about PSR, profit and sustainability. Everyone basically put their accounts in at the end of last year. The thing about Spurs, I remember under Pochettino that he opened up that pathway from the academy. And one of the biggest things I think that Pochettino did was start to help the fan base to remember you can build a team that is disciplined, that is defensively strong, that plays good football without having to break the bank, because he brought through Harry Winks is a good example. I know he's at Leicester at the moment. Is it Leicester he's at the moment?
Yes.
But I remember being at this does relate to your question, by the way, but I remember being at when you were playing at Wembley and you had a Champions League game away to Real Madrid a few days later. And what happened at Wembley is that the players all come through the mix zone, and us journalists, we would wait there with our tape recorders to speak to them. And then after we're done, we'd get a little huddle. So about 4 or 5 of us would stand with Pochettino in a corner with our tape recorders and do what we call a Mondays. So it would be a little preview for the Monday's papers of the Champions League game ahead. And in that Mondays, he was saying to us, look, I'm going to be playing Harry Winks in the game against Real Madrid. And we thought he was kidding us on. You know, Real Madrid, I mean, you've seen that their midfield, they'll have him for breakfast. And he went, no, I'm going to play him. And so we assumed he was going to play him off the bench or whatever. But in that very next game, he started Harry Winks. He had that faith in youth from the academy. Kane had come from the academy. Other players had come through the academy and they were giving them a chance. And Pochettino was basically saying to a fan base, I can make it work. I can do this. And I look at Postecoglou, and he's doing a slightly different thing, is in that he's taking players like Brennan Johnson, for example, good player, but effectively a championship player until he came to Spurs. I know he's at Forest in the Premier League, but people sort of, is he good enough for Spurs? Can he cope in high pressure situations? But already he's looking good. And he's convincing people he can do the business with players like that. Now, in terms of the profit and the sustainability, because Spurs have kept their powder dry, and to be fair, you mentioned Daniel. Daniel has said to the Supporters Trust, look, these are our limitations. This is why we haven't broken the bank like other clubs. We wish we could, but we kind of been very, very open with fans all the time. Fans haven't liked it, but they've been very open about that fact. But now they don't have to be nervous about PSR, whereas other clubs have. Other clubs do have to surrender their players. Other clubs do have to say, look, we've got this need in this area of the pitch, but we can't address it because of PSR. So I think that Spurs, as a football club, are in a good place for all the reasons, ironically, that fans used to criticize them in the past.
Yeah, you know what's interesting on that piece, if I can just say, is that when Daniel first came out and said about the situation around the PSR, FFP, whatever you want to obviously abbreviate it as, that there were many saying, well, you know, this seems like a cop-out. You know, it seems like an excuse. And this was Daniel a few years ago was saying this. And obviously, we've now moved on from that point where it is coming to a head now. And look, for what you want to criticise Daniel on, you can criticise the lack of trophies, you can criticise, look, as I've said many times, the fact that he's not backed some of those managers adequately, as I've made that point. I don't think you can criticise them on the fact that they've always been really ahead of the game when it comes to the finances. And many will say, well, look, they do that because they get a profit out of it. But at the end of the day, I think what we've all wanted to see is that it goes back in to the first team, goes back in and obviously makes us challenge. And again, for me, like I've said, this has probably been one of the happiest winners that we've had so far under Enoch. And my challenge back to Enoch would be, we don't want to see this once. We want to see this consistently over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, that it can't just be one window. It's got to be consistent, got to back the manager, because that's so crucial.
Yeah, but what I would say to that, though, Rick, is that if you look at Chelsea, Chelsea has spent the size of a small country on players.
Yeah.
And I don't know what their identity is.
No.
It's possible to spend a lot of money and be worse than you were before.
Oh, of course. 100%.
And that's why your question about the recruitment is so important, because you've got a team of guys there where there is joined up thinking. And so far, and it might, I don't believe it's luck. I think it's joined up thinking. I think it's due diligence on a level that you haven't seen for a long time at the club. But the Kulusevski, terrific signing. Udogi, terrific signing. Sarr, terrific signing. Porro, terrific signing. Van der Ven, Romero, terrific signings. Vicario, out of this world signing.
Yes, it's crazy. Yeah,
it's there. And with the way that the manager wants to play, it isn't just a question of saying this player is good, he's available, shall we get him? It's working with the manager to say this player is available. Does he fit into the way that you want to play?
Yep.
Do you think he's got the right temperament for your squad? Do you think he's, got the consistency, the leadership ability to be able to perform under pressure? And yeah, I look at Chelsea. I don't want to criticize Chelsea in doing this because I don't get all tribal and all of that nonsense. But I just want to use Chelsea as an example of the fact that you can do what fans want and go out there and spend the kitchen sink and whatever else on players. But you can end up in a situation where you have appeased the fans, but you don't have a team. You don't have an identity. You don't have an operation that you can.
That's Man United as well.
Exactly. Man United have spent millions, billions of pounds, and they don't have a strike force. Where, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, Man United have scored fewer goals than Luton so far this season.
Crazy.
That probably answers your questions around the recruitment and the PSR.
Yep.
Better than anything.
So, I think. Sorry, Rick. Just quickly, just finishing off on that. I think a really good example of leadership. Kind of, you can call it soft skills if you want, but leadership, communication, the ability to hand under pressure, the kind of character. Let's put it like that in football, as you are, is Jude Bellingham. So we all know that Jude Bellingham is an absolute brilliant talent. What old head on young shoulders.
Unbelievable.
But the incident I want to talk about, and which is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, as stupid as it might sound, is why he's been so successful at Real Madrid, is in the World Cup when Kane missed the penalty. It was Jude Bellingham that went over to him and tapped him on the shoulder. This is a 19-year-old that has no jurisdiction, if you like, to go and do that. Other senior players, Hendo, whatever it might be. But it was Jude Bellingham that went over and said, "Don't worry, let's go. Let's make it happen." Sorry, maybe I'm getting confused. Maybe it was in the Euros. But anyway, somebody missed a penalty. Maybe it was a Saka or whatever it was. But the reality was that it was Jude Bellingham was the guy that was picking them up. Leadership, qualities, all them character things. See where I'm coming from? And I think that's the sort of thing that you're looking for. That's not just a technical player. How many step overs you? It's wow. This is what's going to make that man or that woman or that player be different to the rest of the crop. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of brilliant footballers, technical footballers around.
Unbelievable.
Yep. So you're talking the elite people. You have to be nitpicky on certain things. It's that character. I don't know if I've articulated that very
Can
well.
and on that point, can I just say, Lee, again, and Dal, you're more qualified than me to come in and back this up and verify if true. There were reports that he had the opportunity of also moving to Manchester United, by all accounts, around that time. And that you could just say, again, it's, again, force of mind and to kind of see what was going on there, that he very quickly decided that wouldn't be the right career move. And I think, again, we've seen it. And again, this is obviously a Spurs podcast, but one thing you can do is look at other clubs and they may feel there's a bit of a graveyard there of some real attacking talent. Sancho, another one, that have gone to other opposing clubs. And just for whatever reason, such an abundance of talent hasn't worked there. Now, it's not always down to the player. It's the environment they're in. It could be the manager. And Dal, you're a lot more qualified than me to suggest this and say this, that, that guy just really had the mindset to realise that's just not the right career move. And there he is, absolutely flying at Real Madrid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's another good example of a club. Listen, Real Madrid used to be that kind of basket case club as well, where they would bring in players who were commercially strong for them, who would play well with the fan base. But they did have their moments of success. Let's not kid ourselves, because obviously they're Real Madrid and the standards are there that you have to meet, and they had good managers and whatever else. But what they were very good at doing is every time it looked as though they were going off the boil, that it was going to players' heads, they'd break the team up and repopulate it again with the younger players that can buy into what they can do. And the older professionals would stay, but the ones who had a bit of an ego, they could go and move on and infect other clubs. And that's what's happening at one or two Premier League clubs. I think there might have been a danger of that happening in the Spurs side that was broken up by Postecoglou. But I see now in this Spurs team a squad that is hungry again, that has the right direction again, but has that kind of avuncular figure, if you like, that Postecoglou is, that he can put arms around shoulders and he will help you if you are hungry and you want to work and you're committed to what the club want to do. And lastly, the point you made about Bellingham sort of picking up Harry Kane, that when you're young and you have that leadership, you're part of a team that can grow together. And what I hope you do with this Spurs side now under Postecoglou, I hope he gets a long time to build it and rebuild it, and so that you have a club culture that is there to stay. Because there's a big difference between the clubs that are doing well with a good culture and the clubs that are in a good vein of form, but don't necessarily have that culture. Those clubs tend to fall away, but hopefully Spurs will stay up there.
I mean, Darren, I know we're over an hour. I've got a couple of questions to ask you player-wise, just to get your vibe on them from what you're hearing through the grapevine. Emerson Royale, there's been links to a potential move to El Nasa, obviously the club Ronaldo is at. Now, I've got to say, you mentioned it earlier with Emerson Royale. Obviously, he went through a difficult period of Spurs where he was actually booed by a section of the Spurs fans on one of the games. And credit to that man, because he has shown tremendous courage, determination, and for those that are just listening on audio, Mark Letter says, who's Googling avuncular on the back of that?
Nice one, Mark. That's brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. Superb. Just on relation to Emerson Royale, that guy has played every position in Spurs' defence, from left back to centre back to right back. He's played across the back line. And obviously now we're receiving these reports of El Nasa being interested. Spurs reportedly have had they've rejected a bid in the region of around 20 to 25 million. Your gut feeling on it, Dazza? I mean, look, the reality is I don't think a club puts in a bid for a player unless they've got some indication potentially the player wants to go. Although we're hearing reports the player is fairly happy at Spurs. Your gut feeling on that? Do you think he stays? Do you think he goes? What do you
reckon? The way of the transfer, I've worked one or two transfer windows in my time, so I know all the language.
Just the 1 and 2. Look how young he is. Look how young the man is.
Yeah, just 1 or 2. Everybody's happy until the money is down. Yeah, and then once the money is down, you've got a decision to make. You can be happy even though the money is down, but it's just a question of whether or not the move is interesting to you. And effectively, you're right. Clubs tend not to bid for players unless they get some encouragement that the player's interested in going. There are situations where the club isn't aware of the interest. The one thing I'd say about Royale, I had a little dip at him, But actually, something that you just said is so important. His attitude is spot on. For a player that's been booed, for a player that had stick, he plays left side, right side, centre, central defence, and he's honest.
That's why Ange loves him, Daz. That's why Ange loves him. Yeah.
Sometimes you want that in a football club. You might not be the best, but you try harder than some of those players that actually are in some cases. And if he were to stay, it really wouldn't be the end of the world. No. If you get £25 million, you've had it off, obviously. But if he were to stay, you've got someone he's a really honest player, and I like that for him.
I think the gut around this is the issue that we said Lee last night, is that if you let him Royale go, who are you going to bring in now? 8-9 days between the window closing, where you've got adequate cover for Porro. Because the problem Spurs have got is that Royale doesn't just play one position, Mac. We've said it before. He plays left, he plays right, he plays centre half.
He's like a new age James Milner to a certain degree. And actually, who doesn't like them kind of, I don't like the term, but the utility. You're right. You know, if Udogie is out injured, with Ben Davies now out injured, Cess, bless him, can't get fit, can't get a game. Who's playing left back? It's Royale, right? If Porro goes out injured, who's playing right back? It's Royale. You know, there's no one else to go in there. And now with Dragusin, as I'm still calling him, which is an ethnic, the Dragon. Now he's in. It's slightly different, right? But you know, even with the decimation of suspensions and injuries we've had in defence, as you said earlier in the show, Darren, he's played centre back as well. So you know, he does. You know, I think unless there's silly money coming in from Saudi Arabia, like silly money as in 40, well, some people might say silly money for Royals, 25 million. But if silly money, no offense, but if silly money comes in like 40 million, then maybe. But I just don't see why. He's a good guy to have in the squad.
That's really important.
2.5 years left on his contract, so you don't have to get rid of him now.
No.
You know, I don't think it's needed, to be honest.
The attitude is so important. One of them also down doing the rounds at the moment is the guy at Club Brugge winger Antonio Nusa. Spurs are reportedly in talks with the player over a potential move that would see him remain at the Belgian side until the end of the season, with the potential of joining in the club in the summer. It's very similar to the deals that have been constructed for Pat Matassar, Destiny Udogie. I don't know if that's a name you've heard in terms of there being some real genuine interest around him. We know Spurs haven't been the only club that looked at him. I believe he's been looked at by a lot of the top European clubs. Again, raw talent, around, again, 18 years old. Any feeling on that on Darren for you? Is it too early?
Yeah. I mean, he's a good player. He's a Norwegian attacking midfielder. Obviously, Odegaard was.
Can't say that on this show.
Sorry.
Darren's got an awful cough. Can we stop making him laugh, please?
Exactly. If you make me laugh, I'm done.
Sorry.
I think he's got a goal and 4 assists in his first 4 games for his country.
Yep.
And he is a good player with a terrific eye for a pass.
Right.
And it looks like Spurs do have this strategy, doesn't it? Where they sign players and then either keep them with their club or send them on loan to a club that plays similar football to the way that they play, so they can make them ready for the Premier League. He looks like a good player. I wouldn't say he's a statement player because he's still very young and he's still learning the game. But I do think he is another one potentially off the conveyor belt. And if they can do a deal linked to success, linked to achievement, then I think you're going to get a good signing. He is a good player, and from what I've seen of him, he'd be another terrific acquisition for, I want to say, the team. I don't want to put it all down to Paratici because although he's got the contacts, like I say, the other guys, as Lee was saying, that can measure the other metrics deserve as much credit as well.
I don't want to take you too off track because I know
he's still cooking Paratici. We know that. Well, I just think quickly on that. I mean, because there's a couple of people in the comments saying about that loan model to buy somebody to loan them back, and we've done that with Pape Matar and it's worked brilliantly. We've done that with Destiny Udogie, done brilliantly, and I agree with you. If Nusa comes in, it's not as if it's going to be like, oh wow, he's going to be in the first team. next season even. He might go out on loan again next season, so he might have 18 months back to develop because he's only young. But again, it's one of them ones for the future that has worked well for us in the likes of Papa Matasar and Destiny Udogie.
Yep. Daz, I don't want to take you too off piece. We are conscious of time here. Got to quickly ask you about Conor Gallagher's situation. Now, me and Mac have debated this, I think, since the opening of the window, and it's been, again, for those that come on our panelists on Arsenal and Spurs, one that really does, I think, again, go to opposite ends of the scale. You won't even say this, Dazzy. You'll know this. Spurs and Chelsea have not done business since 2001, I believe. That goes all the way back to Gus Poyet. I don't know. Oh, I'll tell you what, it's a long, long time ago. Long time ago. We obviously know there's been change in the ballroom at Chelsea. I'm really intrigued to know whether you genuinely feel, because the one thing people might laugh at me for doing this, I try and watch all of the pressers of a lot of the managers that I do keep an eye on. And I know Potter's left the football club. I still keep an eye on Potter's press conferences. I find them absolutely fascinating, with the point that he seems to be very, very careful and conscious, Pochettino, what he says all the time, that he doesn't mistakenly slip up when it comes to players either going in or going out. Because what appeals apparent with Chelsea, you know this better than me, Daz, it's not all his decision. It very much is the case that, if the hierarchy believe a player's got to go, then they've got to go. And he doesn't seem to have too much influence on that. So really intrigued to know what you make of the Gallagher situation. Bearing in mind that at the moment, he is captain in the football club. He is in Pochettino's first 11 pretty much every week. He's a player that Potter's raved about. But yet there's still this whole thing around, obviously, the FFP, the PSR, that Chelsea are going to need to sell a homegrown player. And the days are ticking. The window's getting closer. Spurs' interest seems to have been there from the summer. I think when we last had you on, I think you said at the time there was some interest from Spurs in the player. We're over Conor Gallagher. What do you feel gut feeling is going to happen to Conor Gallagher?
My concern is that he's going to be sacrificed. He's a good player. He's a terrific player. I'm not that sold on the idea that it would be impossible for him to come to Spurs, and here's why. I thought Chelsea wouldn't sell Mason Mount to what they would regard as a Premier League rival, a title rival, and they sold him to Manchester United for £60 million. And Mason Mount came through their academy. He's poster boy for the academy. He's a terrific player.
Yep.
And ever present when they were doing well under Thomas Tuchel. And I just think as far as Conor Gallagher is concerned, there is that problem with PSR that Chelsea have, and he could be sacrificed. Where could he go? Well, there are any number of clubs that want him, from Crystal Palace, where he did so well, to clubs higher up the table. I think he'd be an excellent fit for Spurs because he's dynamic, he sees a pass, he scores a goal. And working for a manager like Postecoglou, who does put an arm around players and help them to realise their potential, and more to the point, in a settled side like Spurs, as opposed to a chaotic setup like the one Chelsea have at the moment, I think Gallagher could really settle down. I think that at Chelsea, there was an interview that Pochettino gave a few weeks back where he basically said, look, I need more players. And just that interview suggested that he doesn't really have that much faith in the recruitment team at the club, which says, listen, this isn't a Chelsea podcast, it's a Spurs podcast, so I won't dwell too much on that. But I think there is a possibility that Gallagher could come, yes.
I think it's interesting. They just won't go. There's so many brilliant comments in the chat as well, and for the listeners as well on audio. People are split. I mean, I'm in the camp of I would like to see Gallagher come. I would like to see him come to the football club. I think Ange wants him. I think we know that from our internal discussions and whatever that we have, just from our side of things. We know that he wants him. We know that we're really keen on him. So I'd want to see him in a Spurs shirt. But the other side of me is that he is a proper Chelsea boy, and he's a captain. And does he would he put it all out there on the field for Spurs? But what the other thing that we haven't touched, you just literally touched upon it, Darren, there, and I just finish off by saying this about Ange Postecoglou is that his ability to pull players in I think is absolutely, maybe not going under the radar, but it's crucial. To be able to have Dragushin, Bayern, and Tottenham, and to choose Tottenham, to have Maddison come out and say he said that he's going to change and it's going to be completely Tottenham if I sign or not, and that hooked Maddison, and Maddison wanted to come. I think that with the likes of Conor Gallagher, other clubs would be interested. But I really would fancy our chances if Chelsea come out and say, do you know what, PSL, FFP, whatever, we need to get rid of our homegrown. I think we've got the hurdle to get over, which is Broja, because he's also homegrown, and I think they want to sell him first, and that's a little bit more public. You don't get a gain. And also, is it Chalobah? Trevor Chalobah as well, who's just come back from injury. And actually, the reality is if they get rid of them two homegrowns, maybe they can keep Gallagher. So there's a couple of hurdles to go over. It's a complex deal. But I do think that if it got to the point where Chelsea says, yeah, we're willing to look at offers, I think Postecoglou would have Gallagher eaten out of the palm of his hand, to be honest.
I'll also tell you something that I repeat something I told you in the green room before the show. A couple of summers ago, I covered Chelsea on pre-season, and one of the players we got the chance to talk to was Gallagher. It was when Spurs went out to Beverly Hills. What a hard job that was. As I recall, it was a real labour of love.
You can throw it down, I tell you.
I wake up in the middle of the night sweating with nightmares. Anyway.
Can I just say, there he is, putting the kids to bed. There he is, going to Beverly Hills. Full of life.
And my wife would say to me, "What's it like out there?" I go, "Terrible, raining.
Can't wait to get back.
Terrible.
Miss you so much. Miss you so much."
But we got the chance. So there's us, about 4 or 5 of us, and he's on the other side of the table. And he gave a terrific interview about how much he loves Chelsea, he loves the club, and his dream was to start for Chelsea that season. Obviously, Tuchel got the sack soon afterwards, and it all was up in the air, and it looked very much as though in the next window he could go, but he didn't. But I think he would want to hang on for dear life. If there was a smallest chance that he could stay at Chelsea, he would want that to be the case. If he were available, my question to you is, would it matter to you, and maybe everyone listening, if such a good player were available and accepted he had to go and came over? Would the fan base hold that against him, do you think?
I think so. We're about 4 Chelsea managers.
No, it's different. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm torn on this one. I think Lorraine in the comments, to be fair, said something earlier. And I had this with even Darren Bent. I know you know Benty quite well, Darren. But, he's a massive Arsenal. I don't know Darren Bent, but he's a massive Arsenal fan. And he put that white Tottenham jersey on week in, week out for us, knowing that he's an absolute stalwart Arsenal fan. And that does bother me. I'm not going to lie. As a fan, like just as a fan, that tribal thing. With Chelsea, yes, we've had a lot of their managers. And, the great, of course, one of our club legends, Pat Jennings went and played for both clubs in terms of Arsenal and Tottenham. And obviously...
Glenn Hoddle as well.
I was going to say Glenn Hoddle went and played for Chelsea as well. But there's playing for them, and it's Glenn Hoddle is a Tottenham fan, like through and through Spurs, and he went to play for Chelsea. That's the opposite way around. Conor Gallagher is a Chelsea fan, like same as Mason Mount. In the end, he is Chelsea. He hasn't really been able to get on the pitch. And actually, I'm not leveling anything at Mason Mount, so don't know him either. I actually rate him as a player. But yes, he's been dogged with injuries. But is that because he's not playing? Would he have gone through a different rehabilitation? Would he have got on the pitch quicker in a mindset playing for his boyhood club? I don't know. I mean, you can look at Kane. Kane is a Tottenham fan and his boyhood Tottenham, but he's absolutely ripping it up in Bayern Munich. So maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just a fan thing, which is probably why you asked the question. Rick, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm a little bit different to you, Macca. For me, it is a job. It's for me the case for the players that ultimately they go out there, they're well paid, and I expect them, regardless of the club that they have in their heart, they'll go out there and do their job and play very, very well. I'm sure if you sat down with every Spurs player in that dressing room, I don't think any of them are genuine boyhood Spurs fans. They're just playing for the manager. And I think now, again, I don't know age you here. Look, you've seen a lot of players, you've seen a lot of managers that ultimately, let's be honest about it, that players love playing. They want to play. They want to feel a connection with the manager. And ultimately, I don't think it really matters really what the club is they have in their heart. They'll play for the team that they love with the manager. They'll get on with their teammates. And I think that's a big, big part of it. So, it's such an interesting discussion on Gallagher. And I'm conscious it's one that could really, really, take the show off to a different tangent. It would go off on a crazy train, off the tracks. There was a final question I've got to ask you. And now, bearing in mind, I think we've had a couple of thousand watching this, which again is absolutely remarkable, given the fact of where we are battling live football. And it says a lot now. Can I just say again, I say this every time that you're coming on, every time you come on, I've got to say there's so many people that obviously, I hope you don't mind me saying this, they know you're not a Spurs fan, but they really hold your knowledge in terms of in such high esteem that they love when you come on. And again, there's such a wide acceptance there that what they're going to get is honesty. They're going to get someone that actually knows the game, has been obviously around in terms of the fact of managers and players. And that's why you're really well loved.
Thank you very much. Can I tell you, every time I go to the Arsenal training ground in London, Colney, the chaps, they're always stop me and they say, don't let him in, he's a Spurs fan. And I have to tell them, I'm not a Spurs fan. I'm not a Spurs fan. They're lovely guys. I got to tell you, they're lovely. And there are so many places where I go where people say, you're a Spurs fan, aren't you? And I have to say, no. And I try not to sort of talk about allegiances or stuff, but it's just that I've covered the club for so long. And I've seen the growth of the club from when the training ground was at Luxborough Lane to where it is now at Enfield, and how magnificent it is. From White Hart Lane to what the club is now, from the time where they were scratching around for other people's cast-offs to the fact that they can source their own good players now, and the fact that they've got to recalibrate their ambitions now, because obviously at the start of the season you were hoping you might get top four. Now you are a club that can aspire to win in the league, and whether it can be done or not is a different matter, but you're there. And it's just terrific to see. So, a lot of love.
Yeah, there is, Matt. I've got to say, you've just been told that you're Peter Pan. you never ever age. Right, this is the question that could, if we close on this question, this is a question that could endear you even further to the fans, Daz, depending on how you take this question and what you answer. But I got to say, Darmesh Chef, when Darmesh came on a couple of weeks ago, Darmesh has turned 180 on this show. Bless him. He came on at a period where you probably, I don't know if he was in the press at the time when he was asking about Pochettino and Man United, and everyone was absolutely berating him. And then Darmesh is coming onto the show now, being the most popular guy. Darmesh is going to me. I absolutely love this show now. We do love Darmesh, we do. But I'll ask you to close it now. What do you feel constitutes success for Ange Postecoglou in his first season in charge? First part and second part, where do you think the club's going to finish in the Premier League?
If Ange Postecoglou finishes in the top four, he's had a magnificent season. I mean, I would argue to a certain extent, he's already had a magnificent season for two reasons. The style of play is fantastic, and the connection he's built with the fans is as good as anything I've ever seen in my time watching Spurs. He's an honest guy. He's got a very simplistic approach to the job, but it works. He's got the press eating out of his hand already. Now, that's not, to be fair, that's not as important, because you can be a great guy, but ultimately, if you fail, you've got to go. Claudio Ranieri had the press eating out of his hand at Leicester, but when things started to go very wrong, he had to go. The difference between him and Postecoglou is that you can see what he's trying to do. You can see what his long-term vision is. There's an excitement as you see that vision start to take shape. And as we've been saying, it actually isn't about Postecoglou on his own. It's about the team behind him, the decisions they're making, the players they're bringing in, the way it's translating to the pitch. All of that contributes to the reasons why you can start to think about what Spurs could potentially achieve this season. On the pitch, I think top four. That represents a terrific season. When you think about the fact that end of August, Kane goes, everybody thinks it's not going to happen. The Spurs fans that had been watching Spurs in the preseason games and already knew that there was an identity about the way Postecoglou played. I don't know whether they might have been a little bit twitchy at that point when Kane had gone and nobody had come in to, on the face of it, replace him. But there was already a plan. There was already a way of playing in his mind that Spurs had become used to. And you guys have got your Spurs back because even when you won under Conte, Spurs fans were not happy. And I think you could have probably won a cup under Mourinho. You could have won a cup under Conte. Would you have been happy? Not necessarily. You'd be happier if you got to a final under Postecoglou. And even if you lost, you'd feel the club is moving. So a good season is a top 4 place. A magnificent season is a top 4 place in the FA Cup. And a stratospheric season is the title and the FA Cup. We won't go there.
Let's go.
We gotta leave it. We gotta leave it there because it doesn't get any better than Darren Lewis saying that. Macca, what a show, right? Unbelievable.
Oh my god! I mean, you're absolute royalty, Darren, and we love having you on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting chatting as if we're just three guys. All of the interaction as well, three guys in the pub. All the interaction we've had. It's just been superb. So thanks ever so much, everybody. It's been wonderful, Ricky, and you've heard it here first. Darren Lewis, the main man. We're going to win the league.
Don't put that on the front page, well, please.
Where's G-Nev? Where's G-Nev?
Where's G-Nev? Now, I can't even ask you this. For those that don't know where to find you, we're avidly watching every Sunday, my man. We are. Where can we find the wonderful work you do, Dal?
I am at Mirror Darren on Twitter, at Mirror Football at the Daily Mirror, and at Super Sunday Match Day. And obviously the show's between 10 and 12 o'clock every Sunday morning.
Dal, the love continues to pour in.
Big show that we're going to be doing, Darren. Yeah, you remember that one? Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought we'd stop now.
Well, listen, we're going to let Peter Pan go. It's been an incredible show. From the wonderful Lee McQueen, from the superb Darren Lewis. He is amazing. Listen, guys, thank you so much for all your incredible support. It is a happy time right now. Keep those comments coming in. Thanks so much for all the love from myself, from Lee, from the wonderful Darren Lewis. We've been the last one on Spurs. Please keep safe, keep well. We'll be back with you before you know it. And as always, come on, you Spurs.